One. Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2012, hosted by the Association of Fundraising Professionals, Greater New York City chapter. With me now is Steve Jacobson, President and CEO of Jacobson Consulting Applications. Steve, welcome.
Well, thank you, Tony.
We're going to spend some time talking about use of data and data mining.
Great.
You're seeing greater use of data in a more sophisticated ways among charities?
Yes, we are. Historically, it's all been about transactions, how to enter a gift, put that data into the system, generate acknowledgments, and the data was just there. And maybe they'd use that data to go after repeat gifts, recurring gifts, something like that. Mm-hmm. And now what we're seeing is more of an emphasis on actually data mining and some more sophisticated analysis.
And data mining for what purposes? We'll have some time for detail, but generally, what are the categories people are using it for?
Yeah, well, I think it falls into a few different categories. One is really in that constituent relationship management of getting to know their constituents a little bit better, being able to more effectively target them for solicitations, and laying the groundwork really for stewardship going forward.
Okay, so mostly then around fundraising, fundraising relationships.
Definitely around fundraising relationships. I think we see other nonprofits that are maybe more attendance-based, like museums and performing arts centers, that tend to use more data, like from ticketing and admissions, to supplement the fundraising data to get more of a 360-degree view of a patron. But it's definitely using that data to make more effective decisions.
Okay, so now if we're going to use the data for that purpose, we need to make sure that we have the right data. We're collecting enough quantity in the right quantity and accurately. How do we make sure that we have what we need in order to get out what we want?
Well, that's the key, is collecting enough data, the right data, and making sure that it's clean. And a lot of organizations, I think, where they fall down is that someone at some point put in a system, fundraising system, ticketing system, whatever it might be, and it was just coded for expedience. And it really wasn't strategically structured so that they could say, okay, well, give us all of the people that donated to a direct mail campaign. And so the coding needed to be reworked, and that data needs to be clean. I think a lot of organizations have spent time going back through that and recoding. And of course, the data changes. When you have one regime and somebody tracked it one way, and of course, turnover in the nonprofit space is huge, and then someone else comes in and codes it differently.
Yeah.
So it becomes a challenge. But I think a lot of organizations have invested in that cleanup and are now trying to reap the benefits of having that data being in a consistent format.
Okay. Now, if I'm not sure that my data is clean, meaning accurate, what services are available to help me get the right data? How do I go about it?
Well, I think the first thing is identifying that you have a data problem. So if you look at the reports and you say, gee, that doesn't make sense, the data isn't all there, or I've got to go through these crazy gyrations just to get enough data out, I've got a problem. But once you do, then it becomes an issue of mapping that out. There are vendors that help you with that. There are consultants. There are now people being hired on staff, actually, that have that ability to be able to go through and map the data. So it's really just a question of putting it into a real logical format and something that's useful for you as you go through to do the analysis.
Now, on Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio, we have jargon jail, and I'd hate to see you skirting closely to jargon jail. Mapping the data, what does that mean?
Well, mapping the data means that you take the source data, so if it's code ABC, well, one of the things that we use, actually, as a good example, is deceased. You code that somebody is deceased in the database.
Okay.
Well, some people might put it in a certain area. Some people might write deceased in the address, replace the actual street address.
Yeah.
Somebody might put it in a comment. And so what you have is
what's wrong with that? When I look at the screen, I see the word deceased somewhere. What's wrong with that?
Well, it's good if you're just looking at the screen, but if you actually want to run you want to get a list of all of the people in a certain, say, zip code, and they still have that zip code on the record, but they're deceased, that's a problem. So you need to put it actually in a real field so that you could be able to pull that data out consistently.
So we need to know what we want to get out in order to know what we should be preserving?
Exactly.
Okay. So how does an organization figure out what its data needs are? In order to know what kind of reporting we need to be able to pull, how do we make that assessment? What we need?
Well, what we tend to look at are the end user, the end result. So we need to run these sets of reports, and they typically would be management reports. So to get that data out in a form that we can use, we need to make sure that the coding supports that.
Okay.
So that's one thing. Another is that, in addition to management reporting, maybe we want to just actually do some analysis on the fly. We don't really have a set report that we want to pull, but we might say, hey, I've been wondering, what's our support from the following county? Because we're urban-based, but we have a feeling that some of our support's coming from a suburban county. So we need to then make sure that the data is going to support that type of analysis as well.
Okay. Is this always an expensive proposition to clean the data, collect it all, and so that we have what we need for the reporting that we've identified? Is this, small and mid-sized charities, do they have a shot at doing this effectively?
Well, it's a great question, because the small charities are going to struggle. They don't have the resources on staff to do it internally typically, and they can't afford to do it out of house a lot of times. When you start to get into the mid-sized charities, then they may have some expertise on staff, or they may be able to afford to pay a vendor or a consultant or someone to take care of it. So unfortunately, we have a little bit of an issue where those smaller organizations may not have the resources to do it.
Okay. Are there cloud-based systems or applications that can help the small charities at a lower cost? Maybe they're not getting the same robustness that a mid-sized or large charity would get, but are there basic packages or applications available?
Yeah, assuming that you get the data clean, there are very inexpensive packages, even not so much maybe cloud-based, but even just Microsoft Excel, products that you have sitting on your desktop that can actually do some slicing and dicing of the data for you. So It doesn't have to be an expensive proposition.
Okay. And again, that's rudimentary compared to what some of the capabilities are that we're talking about.
Right.
But at least it's something.
It gets them started.
Small shop. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the advantages. What's the value of having smart and accurate constituent data?
Well, one of the things that we see in solicitations, and I'll just talk about perhaps a museum and a membership program, for instance, and if you have a museum membership and it's up for renewal, the museum will send you a renewal notice, and if you don't respond to that, they'll send you another one, and they may send you 4 or 5 continuously until you either respond or they'll give up on you. But there may be some groups that actually make no sense to send maybe more than 1 or 2. For instance, if they joined on site and they bought a family membership and they lived more than 200 miles away, well, chances are they came to the museum, they were on a trip, they looked at the board, they said, gee, if I just buy tickets, it's going to cost me this, so it's more effective for me to buy a membership. If they're not coming back, they're not going to renew the membership.
Yeah.
So I should save the money. I should only send them 1, maybe 2 renewal notices. And if they don't respond, I should forget about it. So by actually going through and data mining and slicing and dicing the data, I can make those determinations. So I can save that expense. And then on the flip side, there are certain segments, if I am soliciting for contributions, that are more likely to donate again. So I can take a look and I can say, okay, the following group of donors will donate more than once a year. They have, historically, but they don't donate, say, more than 3 times a year. So if I send them 4 solicitations in 1 year, that 4th one is just going to go to waste. So I should save my money there, and I should maybe more effectively target those 3 solicitations, perhaps to interests that I know that they have, because I've tracked that data going forward.
And you can also treat your donors with greater personalization.
Exactly.
So you're talking about people who just come, and maybe you're talking about acquiring new donors, but your existing donors, how can you use smart data sophistication to treat your existing donors with a warmer touch? Right.
Well, if you look, for instance, maybe in healthcare, and you see that someone is donating to Parkinson's disease research, and you may have been sending other solicitations out for either general appeals or perhaps targeted to other areas of your hospital, but they don't respond. They're really responding for one particular cause.
Yeah.
Then if you have an event around that particular cause, now you know you should be inviting them. So it's really tracking that data, tracking their interests, tracking how they want to relate to you, and really making that a big partnership.
Okay. And a lot of this does go back to designing your data, right? I mean, again, knowing what you need to know. So there's a field, I guess, for interests, and coding those consistently so that you can query and pull all the people who have the same group of interests.
Exactly.
So, but there's a lot of time spent in data design, isn't that right?
Right. You have to decide what information you want to track and how that's really going to meet your needs. Because you could track anything you want.
Yeah.
But you have to make sure it's actionable data and that you are going to take advantage of it. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time and space.
Okay. And how can we use these smart data practices in collaboration with social networks like Facebook?
Well, I mean, the big challenge is trying to identify that particular donor in your donor system being the same person that's on Facebook.
Yeah.
And so if you can identify that person, then essentially you want to be able to cross-reference what their relationship is with you in terms of donations along with their Facebook presence. So we may want to engage them where they live, which is on Facebook. So whether that's, some sort of a fundraiser where we're giving them the tools to help support our organization so they can reach their friends, more of a peer-to-peer fundraising aspect and really leveraging the social aspect of social networks. We want to make it easy for them. Now, the downside is we don't control the message anymore, we don't control the content, but at least they're getting the word out. And people are more likely to do what their friends say rather than a third party they don't know
You can
about.
leverage that friendship relationship.
Exactly.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what final thoughts, final message that you'd like to leave small and mid-sized charities with around greater data sophistication.
Well, I think right now it's to give some thought when you're putting in a system or when you're actually going to be tracking data. Give some thought as to how you're actually going to use it down the road and structure your codes so that you'll be able to query the data and pull it out in a meaningful way. And then to take advantage of the low-cost tools that are out there to be able to slice and dice the data. And don't think that you can't do something just because it sounds like it's complicated. When you boil it down to, okay, how do we become more efficient and more effective? How do we more accurately target our solicitations? Or how do we more effectively save money on our appeals? They're really very basic questions that you need answered. And you have to just structure the data so to support those answers.
Okay. Well, now I had said final thoughts, but now you said something that piqued my interest, low-cost tools.
Yeah.
And so we talked about Excel. Are there others that you can mention a platform or two if there's value in it for small and mid-sized charities? Are there other platforms that you're acquainted with that are of value for the small shops?
Well, there are some that the vendors have within their tools on the fundraising systems. We have a product, but I don't want to get into that. That'll do that, but there are certainly visualizations so that you could take data and actually graph it with different tools. And some of them, like Excel, are out there. And there are other products that are also, relatively inexpensive. I can't think of any off the top of my head right now of those particular.
Okay, so go ahead. What's the Jacobson Consulting Application product?
Well, we have a product called JCA Answers, and it's a drag and drop utility to be able to slice and dice the data. So you don't need to know how to do any SQL queries or any programming at all. You just drag and drop. So you could say, give me all my donors who gave us more than $100 last year, who happen to live in the following zip codes, and pull a list and say, these are the folks we want to target.
Okay. Steve Jacobson is President and CEO of Jacobson Consulting Applications. You're listening to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2012, hosted by the Greater New York City chapter of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. Steve, thanks for being a guest.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.